It was the kind of crisp, clear autumn morning that makes you feel alive, even if you're a 38-year-old man named Liam, nursing a thermos of lukewarm coffee and trying to convince yourself that a week in the wilderness is exactly what you need. My wife, Sarah, had practically pushed me out the door, insisting I reconnect with nature, especially after the last 6 months of relentless deadlines and forgotten anniversaries. I chose the isolated Blackwood Forest, a place known for its challenging terrain and, more importantly for my purposes, a healthy bear population. This wasn't just a hike, it was a hunt, a primal return to something I felt I'd lost. I'd been tracking a large grizzly for 2 days, a magnificent beast whose paw prints were like dinner plates pressed into the damp earth. The thrill of the chase, the silent communion with the forest, it was all working its magic. I felt every muscle in my body, every sense heightened. The air was cool and carried the scent of pine and damp soil. The rustle of dry leaves underfoot was my constant companion. On the third day, the tracks led me deeper than I'd ever intended to go, to a part of the forest the locals whispered about, a place where the trees grew unnaturally thick, their branches interwoven like gnarled fingers, blocking out most of the sunlight. A perpetual twilight reigned here, even at midday. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues that barely penetrated the dense canopy above me, I found a small clearing beside a fast-flowing, rocky stream. It was a good spot, sheltered, and the sound of the water was a comforting lullaby. I set up my small, lightweight tent, started a modest fire, just enough for warmth and to cook my meager rations, and settled in. The wind began to pick up, rustling through the towering pines with a sound like a distant, mournful sigh. I remember feeling a strange sense of unease, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck that had nothing to do with the chill in the air. This wasn't the usual wilderness apprehension, it was something deeper, more ancient. Around midnight, a sound cut through the drone of the wind and the gurgle of the stream. It wasn't the hoot of an owl or the rustle of a foraging animal. It was a guttural snarl, deep and resonating, followed by a series of sharp, almost human-like yelps. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'd heard bears, coyotes, even a bobcat, but this was different. It spoke of pure, unadulterated aggression, a raw, bestial rage. I grabbed my hunting rifle, a reliable .30-06, and peered out of my tent flap. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting dancing shadows that played tricks on my eyes. The yelping intensified, then abruptly ceased, replaced by a sickening crunch, wet and heavy, that made my stomach lurch. Silence descended, thick and suffocating, broken only by the frantic hammering of my own heart. I stayed still, every nerve on edge, straining to hear over the rush of blood in my ears. After what felt like an eternity, a new sound emerged from the darkness, heavy, shuffling footsteps, accompanied by a low, continuous growl that vibrated through the very ground beneath me. It was close. Too close. I slowly, carefully, unzipped my tent, rifle held ready. The moon, now high in the sky, occasionally peeked through a gap in the clouds, casting fleeting, ethereal light. That's when I saw it. Not the grizzly I'd been hunting, not any animal I recognized from any wildlife guide. This was a nightmare given flesh. It stood on 2 legs, easily 7 feet tall, its body covered in matted, dark fur. Its head was wolf-like, but grotesquely exaggerated, with a snout elongated into a cruel muzzle, bearing rows of dagger-sharp teeth. Its eyes, when they caught the moonlight, glowed with an unnatural, malevolent yellow. This thing was lean, powerfully muscled, and moved with a terrifying, predatory grace. It was ripping something apart near the edge of the clearing, a dark, indistinct mass that I quickly realized was the grizzly I'd been tracking. The bear, which I had considered the apex predator of this forest, was nothing more than a plaything, a meal. A cold, primal terror seized me. This wasn't an animal, it was a demon. It looked up then, its head snapping towards me with an unnerving speed. A guttural roar tore from its throat, a sound of pure, unbridled fury that seemed to shake the very trees. I didn't think, I reacted. I raised my rifle and fired. The shot echoed deafeningly through the silent forest. The creature barely flinched. The bullet seemed to thud into its shoulder, but it just let out another roar, a sound of pain, yes, but more of anger. It lunged. I scrambled back, tripping over my own feet, barely managing to chamber another round as I fell. The creature was incredibly fast, covering the distance in a few terrifying bounds. I fired again, this time aiming for its head. The bullet struck something hard, a sickening crack, but the monster just shook its head, letting out a shriek that was a horrifying blend of animalistic rage and something almost intelligent. It was on me then, a crushing weight, its claws tearing at my clothes, at my skin. The stench of it was overpowering, a mix of stale blood, damp fur, and something rotten, utterly foul. I screamed, not a cry of pain, but of pure, desperate terror. I fought, thrashing, punching, anything to get it off me. Its hot, fetid breath washed over my face, its fangs just inches from my throat. I could feel its immense power, the sheer, raw force of it. This was no ordinary creature. This was an unstoppable engine of destruction. I managed to twist, bringing my hunting knife, a sturdy blade I usually used for skinning game, up in a desperate arc. I plunged it into its side, feeling the resistance of thick muscle and sinew. The creature howled, a sound of agony and rage, and for a moment, its grip loosened. I rolled away, scrambling to my feet, my body screaming in protest. My rifle lay somewhere in the darkness. I didn't dare try to find it. The creature was bleeding, a dark, viscous liquid staining its matted fur, but it didn't seem to slow it down. Its eyes were locked on me, gleaming with an insatiable hunger. It was a hunter, and I was its prey. I bolted, running blindly into the dense, unfamiliar woods, the creature's heavy footsteps pounding behind me, closer, always closer. Branches whipped at my face, roots tripped my feet, but adrenaline surged through me, giving me a desperate speed. I could hear its ragged breathing, the occasional snarl, the sickening crack of branches under its enormous weight. It was relentless. I had to get out, had to find shelter, had to escape this living nightmare. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs ached with a fire I'd never known. I glanced back, seeing its terrifying silhouette against the faint moonlight, gaining on me. I stumbled into a small, rocky overhang, a shallow cave really, and squeezed myself inside, pulling dead leaves and branches in front of the opening. My breath hitched in my throat. I could hear it outside, sniffing, growling, circling. It knew I was there. I was trapped. The air grew heavy with its putrid smell. I clutched my knife, the only weapon I had left, my hand slick with sweat. Time stretched, an unbearable eternity of waiting, listening to the monster's angry growls and the occasional scrape of its claws against the rocks. Just when I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, when the primal fear threatened to overwhelm my sanity, the sounds began to change. The growls became less frequent, less aggressive. There was a new sound, a whimper, a pained moan. The air grew cold, a pre-dawn chill that seeped into my bones. Then, silence. A profound, absolute silence. I stayed hidden, unmoving, for what felt like hours. I didn't trust it. I couldn't. Finally, as the first hint of gray light began to filter through the canopy, I slowly, cautiously pushed aside my makeshift barricade. The clearing was empty. The grotesque creature was gone. The grizzly's carcass was still there, a gruesome testament to the night's horror. My tent was shredded, my supplies scattered. My rifle was nowhere to be seen. I stumbled out of the woods, bloodied, bruised, and utterly traumatized. I don't remember much of the walk out, only a desperate, singular focus on putting as much distance as possible between myself and that place. I was found by a park ranger, incoherent and half-mad with fear. They treated my injuries, listened to my wild, unbelievable story with a mixture of pity and skepticism. They blamed a rogue bear, perhaps a mountain lion. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel the cold dread that still clings to me. I never went hunting again. The forest, once a place of solace, now holds only the terrifying echo of that night. I know what I saw. I know what hunted me. And every full moon, when the air grows still and the shadows lengthen, I can still hear the phantom growl, and I wonder if that monstrous thing is still out there, lurking in the deepest, darkest parts of Blackwood Forest, waiting for its next victim.